And I'm David Bromstad.
In 2023, David Bromstad faced a life-altering event when a powerful storm ravaged his Florida home. The house, which he had spent years carefully building and designing, was reduced to a skeletal structure, with water damage, mold, and destroyed interiors leaving the space unrecognizable. What had once been his sanctuary, a place where he could unwind and let his guard down, disappeared almost overnight. This was more than just a material loss. It destabilized the very foundation of his emotional well-being. Behind the scenes, the destruction triggered a profound crisis, resurfacing unresolved personal wounds and contributing to a growing dependence on alcohol and substances. While he continued appearing on television with his usual optimism, the storm initiated a spiral that tested his resilience, forcing him to confront vulnerabilities he had long kept under control. The loss of the house was the tipping point that would redefine his life, revealing how deeply tied his emotional stability had been to a physical space he once considered safe. A home as emotional refuge. Before the storm, David Bromstad's house was more than a building. It was a carefully curated emotional refuge. Having created it entirely on his own, it represented autonomy and control, free from rules, expectations, or deadlines. Every corner, color, and object reflected his personality and memories, providing him with a sense of calm that allowed him to decompress after the demands of a public life. The home was a form of emotional regulation where cooking, sleeping, or simply sitting in quiet offered him a release from the pressures of performance. The meticulous attention to design, vibrant colors, symmetry, and playful touches mirrored the way he wanted to feel inside, safe, creative, and balanced. Losing the house meant losing a key tool for managing stress, a consistent source of stability that no therapy or routine could replace. The destruction of this sanctuary exposed a vulnerability that had been long contained, forcing Bromstad to confront the fragility of his inner life in a way he had never anticipated. The brutal impact of the storm. The storm's arrival was immediate and merciless, leaving floors soaked, walls damaged, and mold spreading rapidly through the house. Rooms that once felt intentional and comforting were stripped bare, revealing the raw skeleton of the building and erasing the sense of safety it once provided. Returning to the damaged home became a source of anxiety as each corner reminded him of loss and exposure. Repairs and rebuilding projects could not restore the emotional comfort he had previously taken for granted, leaving him in a constant state of tension. The home no longer absorbed his stress. It reflected instability back to him. This shift marked a turning point, not just physically but psychologically, as Bromstad faced the collapse of a system he had relied on to regulate emotions. The storm exposed the precarious balance between external order and internal well-being, highlighting how intertwined his mental stability had become with the home he had built to shield himself from life's unpredictability. The hidden spiral. Despite the devastation, Bromstad maintained his public persona, appearing on set and continuing work as if nothing had changed. This external composure, however, masked a growing internal struggle. The loss of his sanctuary removed the one space where he could process stress, leading to accumulated pressure and the resurfacing of old emotional wounds. Insurance delays, rebuilding obstacles, and temporary living arrangements only intensified the strain. To cope, he increasingly turned to alcohol and substances, which initially provided temporary relief but gradually became a habitual escape. This period of erosion was subtle. Control did not vanish suddenly, but boundaries loosened, and the gap between public functionality and private struggle widened. The substances were no longer a choice but a necessity to maintain daily operations. Physically, sleep patterns faltered, anxiety spiked, and emotional regulation declined. The spiral was not defined by reckless actions, but by the quiet, relentless breakdown of coping mechanisms that had sustained him for years, demonstrating how the loss of stability can quietly undermine even the most disciplined lives. The erosion of mental health. As the spiral continued, Bromstad's mental health deteriorated in parallel with his physical and emotional systems. The absence of his home as a stabilizing force amplified feelings of vulnerability and insecurity, triggering memories of earlier life experiences that had never been fully resolved. The home had provided containment for these memories, and without it, unresolved trauma surfaced with greater intensity. Substance use temporarily muted these sensations but deepened the underlying dependency. The loss of his sanctuary became symbolic of a broader collapse. It reflected the fragility of the systems he had relied on to maintain composure. Decisions became reactive, sleep remained fractured, and anxiety became a constant companion. The erosion was cumulative rather than abrupt, demonstrating how long-term stress and the removal of even one key stabilizing factor can push an otherwise functioning individual into a crisis. Bromstad's experience underscores the delicate balance between emotional support, coping mechanisms, and environmental stability, revealing the profound psychological consequences when any one of these pillars is lost. The turning point: seeking help. Eventually, Bromstad recognized that the coping strategies sustaining his public image were unsustainable. Entering treatment marked the first conscious step toward recovery. The initial focus was on physical stabilization, as months of stress, disrupted sleep, and substance use had taken a clear toll. Withdrawal and recalibration were uncomfortable but necessary. His body and nervous system needed time to adjust after prolonged exposure to stress and chemicals. Sleep patterns began to normalize, energy levels stabilized, and concentration gradually returned. This period forced him to confront suppressed emotions and unresolved trauma, which surfaced more vividly once chemical distractions were removed. The early phase of treatment was not about insight or healing, but about creating a foundation that would allow deeper emotional work. Bromstad's experience highlights the importance of addressing the physical components of stress and addiction before attempting emotional recovery, setting the stage for the more complex process of rebuilding emotional regulation and self-awareness. Developing emotional awareness. The second phase of Bromstad's recovery emphasized emotional insight and understanding. Therapy helped him recognize the patterns that had guided his responses to stress, particularly the use of productivity and substance use to maintain control. The loss of his home was reframed as a trigger that exposed a long-standing coping system rather than the sole cause of collapse. Through guided reflection, he began connecting present difficulties with unresolved adolescent experiences, understanding how early feelings of insecurity influenced adult behavior. Sleep and appetite normalized, and tension in his body eased. Mentally, however, confronting these patterns was challenging. He had to face long-suppressed memories and emotions, learning to process discomfort without automatic avoidance. This phase emphasized awareness over endurance, teaching him that acknowledging vulnerability is a necessary step in preventing future crises. The work required patience and humility, helping him shift from reactive coping to intentional, conscious management of emotional states. Rebuilding self-regulation. The third phase focused on rebuilding the skills necessary to maintain balance without reliance on substances. Bromstad learned to recognize early signs of emotional overload, such as restlessness, shallow breathing, or irritability, and respond proactively rather than reactively. He practiced pacing himself, reducing the intensity of stress before it became unmanageable. Physical cues were monitored alongside emotional ones, ensuring a holistic approach to well-being. The goal shifted from tolerating discomfort to managing it intentionally, fostering resilience rather than survival. Energy levels stabilized, sleep became more consistent, and overall physical and mental rhythm improved. This stage reinforced the principle that recovery is not a single event but an ongoing process requiring vigilance, attention, and conscious practice. The emphasis on proactive management created a sustainable foundation for long-term stability, empowering Bromstad to navigate life's challenges without resorting to old coping mechanisms. Redefining boundaries in daily life. Leaving treatment marked a significant shift, not in dramatic transformation but in the way Bromstad approached life. Sobriety became a functional necessity rather than a moral achievement, and daily routines were structured to preserve energy and minimize stress. He recognized triggers, particularly around unfinished home repairs and work pressures, and created space to respond deliberately rather than react impulsively. This period involved self-imposed boundaries, mindful pacing, and consistent monitoring of emotional states. Bromstad's approach transformed his relationship with daily life. Rather than seeking constant resolution or control, he focused on maintaining stability through conscious, incremental steps. The emphasis on attention over performance allowed him to engage fully with work, family, and personal projects without slipping back into destructive patterns. Recovery was reframed from a heroic act to a practical, sustainable practice,